like really been incredible. My heart is fed at seeing all of you here as well. I work for the Milestone House. Milestone House is a nonprofit. We're hoping to put something like this together every quarter. We'll have Chris lead the way on that. We're so grateful for that. Anyway, we're just all grateful that you're here. Thank you, Mike, for the founder of Milestone House 22 years ago. And we have a couple of more hours to go. We're going to go through steps 10, 11, and 12, and we'll start off with Chris.
Yeah, listen, a couple of things before I get going. I've been paying real close attention to Milestone House for a long time now. It was Mike's vision to put this thing together, and he put it together and got real serious about it. And countless people have gotten their first glimpse of what recovery is like. And Nicoletta has been such a solid guiding light in this endeavor that it's amazing. I can't tell you how many people. I pointed somebody in your direction yesterday.
You did. I talked to them all.
And they're always real winners too. You know. Yeah. Talk to Nicoletta. I'm gonna block your number. So. No, that's not really true. Oh man, I'm really having fun doing this with Marty. Oh my God, this is so cool. Listen, a couple of things on Amends. Before I move into anything else, there's really good instructions on amends in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. There's instructions on financial amends. There's instruction on criminal amends. There's instructions on stepping out on the miss amends, right? There's the man we hate amends. So it really covers everything, and I highly recommend that you pay attention to that. And when Marty said a sponsor is needed more in these steps than anywhere else, he's not kidding. An experienced sponsor is really needed as we move into these amends, because you can make things worse. I want to tell you a story. I'll tell you a couple stories. All right, so this is back during a period of time. It was around 2000 or something. I was working with like way more people than I should have. They're over my house every night. I forget where they are in the steps. There's so many of them that I'm working with, right? And there was this one guy who had just done his fifth step. And this is before I got to meet with him to explain how to do the amends cards or any of that stuff. He decides that, he admitted some stuff, and he decides that he's going to make amends to his wife. And so he's a highfalutin businessman, and, he'd done a little stepping out, and he sits down with his wife, and he admits that he's had, over the course of the last 10 years, he's had 3 affairs with women at work. I'm sorry about that. She got pissed. She beat the shit out of him. She beat him to almost a pulp. He almost lost an eye. She was like kicking him in the head when he's down. Emergency room, all this, and he calls me up after the fact. Didn't go so well. Right? Like, what are you doing? And the worst part was she absolutely insisted on knowing who the 3 women were and getting a hold of them and their husbands about this whole thing. Which I go, do you have any idea how much worse you made this thing? So when it says, should we admit this to the people we love? Not always, we think. And something like that is where you need a really good, experienced sponsor. We cannot unburden ourselves if it is going to cause harm to others. That's just not fair. You know what I mean? It's not fair. And I've seen a lot of people cause a lot of harm doing it. That's not the purpose of this. You know what I mean? I'll tell you about a couple of events that really meant something to me. So when the smoke cleared, and you know, and I'm putting, it was probably my second amends list. I'm putting it together. I put my niece down on it. This is my sister's daughter, and all I can say is whenever I saw her, it was a holiday because we would all be at my mother's house. And what would I do on holidays, Marty? I'd drink. and somebody would say something. You know how they are. You know, they're gonna say something. What you say? And I have hazy recollections, you know, of saying some things to her that were, you know, an uncle just doesn't say to a niece. You know, she reminded me so much of myself. It disgusted me, and it wasn't her, it was me. So it's time to do this amends, and you know, I make the direct amends to her. You know, I do the deal. This is where I know that I was wrong. I'm really trying to live a different life. You know, you want to talk about this? Did I leave anything out? You know, what would you have me do to set right this wrong? Because you know, this is certainly what I'm willing to do anything in reason. And she was just blown away. She's like, no one's ever done anything like this to me before. You know. She was just kind of really blown away by it. And all right, and we go our separate ways. Well, about 3 months later, she ingests just a little bit too much LSD, and ends up in the psych ward, like, you know, psychiatric emergency 101. And does she call her mother? Does she call her father? She calls me because she thought I would be able to understand. And I actually did. I said, did everybody turn into Muppets? You know? She's like, yeah, how did you know? So I was able to point her towards therapy. Really what this kid needed was therapy. She'd grown up in a crazy house. Her father was just an awful asshole. Her mother was not present at all. And she, you know, she grew up without a lot of direction and became, you know, had just a lot of issues. And I was just to say, you know, you should probably you know, get a therapist. And she's like, well, my father used to say to me, if I don't behave, he's going to take me to the head shrinkers. I don't want to go to the head shrinkers. And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. You know, therapy's cool. You know, my wife has 20 years worth of it, you know, and my wife at that time. And so she did, because I gave her direction, and she spent 5 or 10 years in therapy, and she is so centered now. She plays violin in groups in New York City. She's got an apartment in New York City. She's an executive at a tech company. You know, I mean, really, really doing well, making more money than all of us put together. And I don't know. I think this process might have had something to do with it. You know, I come from a spiritual lineage where you do your nice step. You know, Mark and Joe, you do it, unless it's going to harm other people. You goddamn it, you do it. If they're in California, you get a plane ticket. If they're in Australia, take a week off. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna do your amends. And what I've seen from this, and I've seen it in other people, and I've experienced it myself, is there's no more freedom or power to be gained from any step other than like step 9 will give you more freedom and more power than you can imagine. So. And that's what I think Alcoholics Anonymous is about. I think it's about power and it's about freedom. It's about gaining access to a power that can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. This power, This is what we promise you in AA. The power of God will work in you and through you and do for you marvelous things. They don't even promise you that in church, Monty. I mean, think about it, you know? But it's true. It's true. It's this power. And this is all about power. Being powerless, you have to have power to be able to stay separated from drugs or alcohol. And the power is deep. The power can be very, very deep. And each of us is given the dignity to come to terms with the power of our own conception and our own understanding and our own experience. And the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is, the thing about AA, the difference between AA and church, where it regards our relationship with this power, is like this. I'm 11 years old, and my mother comes in and she says, "Time for you to be a Methodist. Your brother's a Methodist, your sister's a Methodist, your father and I are Methodists, you're going to be a Methodist." I'm like, okay. And off I go to Sunday school. And in Sunday school, the Methodist Sunday school, they teach you this and they teach you that. This is how we see the Trinity. This is that. This is Moses, and this is all the other people and everything. And do you believe this? Yes. Yes. Okay. We're going to put you up, and we're going to stand you up in front of the church for confirmation. And I stood up in front of the church, and they asked me. They asked me if I believe in these precepts, and you know what I said? I said yes, not understanding any of it. Yeah, and I became a Methodist. They told me what I was to believe. Alcoholics Anonymous, they know. Bill knew alcoholics. We aren't going to be jumping on that boat. But what we offer you is we offer you the experience of God. We offer you the experience of God. You come into AA, you start going to a bunch of meetings. You'll start to see God at work. You start to work through some of these steps. You're going to start to experience the power. You may not understand it. You may not be able to define every single attribute of this, but you know there's something going on. You know that there's a power awake in you now that wasn't awake in you before. And some of us call that power God. And nothing will get you ready to accept that power than step 9. It's just gonna. So how I see all this is I see God has been awake in me forever. God is the power of God is always available. What I do is I screw it up. I take self-will and I build up all kinds of constructs around myself, all kinds of roadblocks, log jams, everything, by living life along selfish and self-centered lines. There's no access. The sunlight of the Spirit can't come in. The experience of God is not going to work with all that crap. And so when I get to step 9, what it is it's like taking logs out of the log jam between me and access to power, the sunlight of the Spirit, the great reality, the fourth dimension of existence, the consciousness of the presence of God is what starts to become awake in me as I'm finishing these amends. I know some people in this room. Who have done some heroic amends, flying all over the place, making appointments. And you know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about, gaining access to that power. And it's also about freedom. As I'm making amends for how my selfishness and self-centeredness has caused harm to other people and other institutions, I start to get free of the bondage of self. I ask for that in step 3. I start to get free of it in step 9. That bondage of self. What's the bondage of self? That toxic experience of self-consciousness. So So are these amends important? You don't know what Alcoholics Anonymous is if you haven't done these amends, because that's where all this stuff wakes up. That's where all this stuff becomes operable in your life. Do we do them? Do we do everything perfectly? I've done amends wrong. I've done everything wrong that you can do right. I've done it wrong. I think we get graded on effort. Intention and effort. I really do, and I think we gain the freedom and the power, just trying to do the best we can. Now, like I said before, take a look at steps 1 through 9 and consider them a spiritual boot camp of one kind or another. They're aggressive spiritual exercises that we take in a short period of time. They're revolutionary. They're transformational. They're revelatory. And we come out of amends like holy mackerel, and we've been disciplined for the spiritual life. And the next step they ask us to pay attention to is step 10. And in essence, this is how I see my experience with step 10. I've been given a series of spiritual exercises to employ as I move through the first 9 steps. I'm to apply those spiritual exercises where it is appropriate throughout the day. So this is my living a sober life step. When I cause harm, I learn to try to set that right as soon as possible. Do I need to talk to somebody? Am I selfish? Am I self-centered? Am I self-seeking? Am I dishonest? Be awake to those manifestations of self that continue to defeat me. I've seen their terrible destructiveness as I've gone through the first 9 steps. I'm being told to be mindful of those as I move into step 10. And there's appropriate action if I need to inventory. I inventory. There's appropriate actions to take when self creeps back in and screws something up. And step 10 asks me to do that. And there's some very, very simple instructions, and they're really to be paid attention to if we want to be able to say that we're turning this thing into a way of life, right? Now, I want to share a couple more things, and then I want to turn it over to Marty. And Marty, you can do 10, 11, whatever you want. So I got a new sponsor about 4 years ago. For the longest time, I had Good Stuff Gary. Before him, I had Fish Food Phil. Now I have Cowboy Brad. But good stuff. I was with Good Stuff Gary a long time, and then he moved away on you. Sponsors will move away on you. It should be illegal, They don't realize the emotional damage that they could do by picking up and moving. But they move away on you, and that's why I've gotten a new sponsor every single time, because they moved away on me. And Good Stuff Gary moved away on me. And he became really, really hard to communicate with. He was in the hospital a lot with his wife, and I just knew the responsible thing is to be accountable to another person on this spiritual journey. That's the virtue of having a sponsor, being accountable. So I heard this guy Brad share at one of the meetings. I met him at a couple of meetings, but I heard him share at our home group, and he was coming from a spiritual place that I found very, very attractive. I later learned out what that was. There was a group of people just north of the LA area years ago who got involved in some really, really, really deep spiritual work. Chuck Chamberlain was one of them, but there was a whole bunch of them. And they were all going to this one church. It was the Church of the Science of the Mind or something, right? And out of that group, the AAs that went there learned all this crazy stuff. Chuck didn't learn that stuff in AA. He learned it at this Church of the Science of the Mind or something. And all these people started jumping out of this church and started to sponsor people. And they were really, really deeply into what I would term experiential spirituality. They were all in. They were the people that were going to the retreats. That, they were in the meditation circles, and they went all in on this stuff. And Brad came out of that school, so that's why I found it attractive. And we've been working together about the last 4 years, and he's got me doing a number of different exercises all the time. And a couple of them I'll share with you today, because they're really, really meaningful for me, and they have something to do with step 10 and certainly step 11. So we've talked a bunch about the economy of the spiritual life. You need to understand that. This is simple. We're the ones that complicate it. When I first got sober, I thought, oh man, I got to get spiritual. So I bought like the Course in Miracles and the book Your Rant. And stuff. You ever read the Course in Miracles? It's like 1,700 pages of tiny little print with exercises you're never going to do. It just goes on and on and on. I just need something simpler because I actually have to do it. You know what I mean? I actually have to do it. Because reading about it has never helped. So he gave me a couple of exercises. I want to share them with you. All right. He told me, he goes, Chris, I want you to tell yourself you're doing whatever you're doing. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. Whenever you're doing something, I want you to tell yourself you're doing it. I'm like, okay. And then he goes, and whenever you're doing something, I want you to ask God for help. Doesn't matter what it is. Ask God for help. So I'm like, okay. And then he goes, whenever you step outside of a building, I want you to look up. I'm like, you want me to look up? And he's like, yeah. And listen, you got to understand, every time you give me a suggestion, I don't think it's going to work, and I think it's stupid. Every time, right? But I've learned that there's virtue in following a sponsor's advice. I don't need to know why. The virtue and the exercise is to do it. So I start doing this stuff, and let me tell you what my experience is. Again, I don't do this stuff perfectly, and I don't do it all the time. But tell yourself what you're doing, all right? Chris, I'm standing up a podium in Dover, New Jersey, trying to talk about step 10. That's what he wanted me to do. Now, so I started to do that, and you know what that did? It brought me in. It brought me into the present. So much of the problems I have emotionally and spiritually don't reside in the present. They're in the past, or they're the anxiety of the future. So I start always telling myself what I'm doing. I'm right here. I'm right now. I'm in the now. And that exercise was designed to help me be in the now. The holy now. Where all is well. Now, he told me to always ask God for help. I'm going to be speaking with Marty today. God help me. That wasn't really like that. No, God help me carry a message today. God help me drive home from Dover. God help me do it. Now, what does that do? What does that do? Puts me into the consciousness of the presence of God constantly. And there's instructions in our big book, Thy will not mine be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We're supposed to constantly be communicating and in communication with the Spirit, with the divine. And that exercise started to, God's always helping me because I'm always asking him for help. it was revelatory. Now the last one, when you walk outside and you look up, what I started to recognize and what I started to realize is an overwhelming gratitude I got. I look up at the clouds, I look up, I'm out in the country, I look up at the trees and the mountains, and more, I'm incredibly grateful that I've been given this opportunity to be a self-aware biological being on this planet Earth at this particular given time. And I started to see this world is really, it's God's cathedral. You start looking around and you just know, I just know God made this for us for a playground. Let's make something really cool. And it's God's cathedral and it's a playground. And you know what? We're all on recess together. You know what I mean? We're learning how to be kids. We're learning how to get along and not hit each other and play fair. And here we are. We're on this ginormous playground. And I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity. I love every moment of life today. And you know where I was in 1989? I had a .38 caliber handgun put to my head almost every night, cursing myself for a weakling that I couldn't pull the trigger. That's a huge disparity. And here's the exercise. I'm going to repeat this twice. Here's the exercise he has me working on today. He said this to me. He goes, Chris, I don't want you to worry about anything that's not happening. Let me say that again. Because that's big, right? That's pretty huge. I don't want you worrying about anything that's not happening. Now that almost seems irresponsible, right? But it's not like I don't plan and I know I'm prepared at work and I'm doing all this stuff. I'm just not worrying about it. I'm trying not to worry about it. And all these lessons I think come out of this spiritual way of life that we're offered here. And step 10 it's an incredible piece of work. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. So I'm exercising my will by asking God for help and telling myself what I'm doing and being grateful. It says, if we've carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. The manifestation of the Spirit within us. And this is just an incredibly ridiculous journey. It's all I came here for was to not die drinking. And I can't even believe some of the stuff that's happened to me. I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to be here with Marty. Come on up.
Yeah, it's we come and we hammer into those steps 4 through 9, and like I was saying, that's the body of the AA program. We got to surrender in steps 1 and 2, and then this decision made in step 3, and then a cleaning house in between 4 and 9, and then what are we left with? We're left with sort of discovering a way to live. And I think the beauty of this is, like, I'd sit around tables for years in the 12 and 12 meetings that I would attend, and I would sit and I would share about step 10 as we read it out of the 12 and 12, and having no personal experience or identification or relevance to anything to do with sobriety, and just try to sound smarter and smarter and smarter each week. Try to read it even before the meeting so that I knew what was coming up. And I remember my first sponsor said, The essence of the 10th step isn't saying sorry, son. It's not doing the things that make it necessary to say sorry. And it was one of those brilliant sayings that I thought, I don't even know what that means. You know, I have no idea what that means. And, you know, when I see what I've got, you know, your book is going to be pretty decimated around this area. Steps 3 and step 10, I think, anyway, mine is. It's where I live today. I believe that all the secrets to good living are tied into this step. I have no other place to go. I don't reside anywhere else. I live here, right here. It's not a coincidence that this is where Chris, with his longevity and sobriety, and what I believe is a very powerful, sound Alcoholics Anonymous message, can sit here and just pontificate at length about what it's like to live in this place. I said earlier that I would talk a little bit about the now and about the importance of the now. And Chris touched on that. And in the 6th step, we're introduced to the now. Are you now ready to have, you're introduced to this concept, are you now ready to have these things removed? And now is a place none of us are very familiar with. You know, it's very difficult to live in this moment. I don't know of any other sort of spiritual program that exists that actually puts its emphasis on that. And again, I think this 10th step is everything. I think it was created, it was developed, it was evolved, it was, you know, how did Wilson know? Like, how are all these things sort of strapped together? I don't understand it. I can't think of any other hand but a divine hand that had an influence on how this comes to pass. And the practical application of these 12 steps is what I'm always interested in. I sat for many years philosophizing about the 12 steps, reading about them, thinking about them, looking for cute things to say about them. That's what I did, and believing I was in a 12-step program, living the 12 steps that way. I'm going to just go through a little something for you here to sort of maybe put it in a frame of relevance to... Here's the news. It's difficult news for people to swallow. They don't like it when I say it because they think I'm minimizing the terrible sort of trauma of their lives. But the news here in step 10 is there's nothing wrong. There's not a goddamn thing wrong with your life. And the challenge that I put out there is I say, if I asked you right now, right now, here and now, what is wrong with your life, you'd have to say, well, nothing. But your ego quickly comes and tells you the story about what's happened this morning, what's going to happen tomorrow. It quickly comes up there and goes, so this guy's a tool. Like, does he even know what he's talking about? Like, I got real shit going on in my life. I've got stuff to worry about. I have stuff that I feel awful about. And you know what? The last few years have taught me that this stuff is real. And again, my passion probably wouldn't be there if it wasn't. This thought brings us to step 10. What thought? That these promises that they give us in step 9 and the experiences we've had in those first 9 steps are going to materialize if we work for them. So the 10th step puts me in a position where I need to be aware. I need to be conscious of the now. I need to be awake to this moment, right here, right now, when everything's okay. And those practices that Chris is talking about help me be grateful about that I'm standing in the moment. But that's not what real life looks like. That's right? It's real life for Chris, but that's not what real life looks like. We all got wives or husbands or children that drive us crazy or jobs that are tough. We all got bosses that are bitches. You know what I mean? We all got that stuff, right? So we're going to be challenged to stay in the now. But I don't even know if the obvious nature of this step is if people are aware. But it says at the stop brings us to step 10. It says we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right mistakes as we go along. We commence this way of living as we clean up the past. So this is happening while we're making a 9-step amends. It says we entered the world of the Spirit. We're no longer living in the world of the material. We have entered the world of the Spirit. And it's a practice. These are practices. How do we know that that's happened? Because our measuring stick can show, and this is what Sandy used to say, the measuring stick is, have some of these promises occurred in your life? Have you had a taste of some of these promises? Because these things are going to start to materialize, and we're going to go along, and these things are going to start to sort of reveal themselves. We vigorously commence this way of living as we clean up the past. We've entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in effective and understanding. or understanding and effectiveness. It's not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. Continue seems to be a really important word here. Continue, continue, continue. It's all over the chapter or all over the paragraph. So it wants us to watch for some things. You guys familiar with what I'm talking about right now on page 84? What are we watching for? Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Where did we learn to do that? Pardon me?
The last time you were at the whiteboard.
We learned to do that at step 4, right? So we're going to continue to watch for that stuff. And when they crop up, what do? We ask God who wants to get rid of. When did we learn to do that? 6 and 7. We ask God to remove our defects of character. When these things crop up, we ask God. So we're talking about right now, when this thing crops up. So when anger, resentment, bitterness, any of that stuff sort of crops up, fear. When these things crop up, what do? I immediately ask God to remove it. Now that's bringing it into the mix. That's a spiritual discipline. That's this awareness that there's this power. We're not going to try to solve the problem. And it says it once to remove it. We discuss with somebody else at once. Where do we learn to do that? Then it says, we discuss with someone immediately, we make amends quickly if we've harmed anybody in the process. Okay? So something crops up, where do we learn to make amends? That's 8 and 9. Now what does it say?
Turn our thoughts to somebody who can help.
Turn our thoughts to someone who can help. Step 12. We have our program of action that we're talking about there all morning, which we've been talking all afternoon, we've been talking about right now. Right here, right now. When they crop up. Now, that again still looks like a theory. It looks like a theory. And when we talk about it, it is a goddamn theory. Try telling somebody this. You got no problems. They don't like it. You tell someone they come to you with a problem. Say, that's not a problem. And they say, well, don't diminish my sense of worth and all that shit, right? It's like we have a spiritual way of living that we can agree upon. And this idea that I can be free of this is foreign to somebody who never has the experience. I'm living my life. You guys all know Sandy's story, and if you don't, look up Sandy's story, and you'll hear about what happened with him. And so I'm spending time with him, and I hear his story, and from his story, sitting over dinner, I'm deeply affected by the power of a God that can help remove the anxiety or the pain or the anguish or the grief of losing a daughter. Immediately, bang. So you lose a kid. So I'm driving home one night, it's a Thursday night, love my home group. Love my home group, it's my favorite thing to do. I'm driving down to my home group and I get a phone call that my middle daughter Sarah, who I mentioned earlier, has hung herself. And I'm in the front seat of my car and I start losing my shit. I smash on the dash, I smash in the mirror and I scream out, really? You know, really? After all I do for you? And I'm filled with anger and rage. Rage. And this stuff came over me. I said, oh my God, you got to take this from me. I'm on my way to my home group. You got to take this from me. I go down the hill and I run into Brian, my workshop partner, and I fall into his arms and I start crying. I start telling him what the call I just got. He says, what do you want to do? The drunk buggy pulled up. A couple of guys fell out of it. Got them into the meeting, got them settled. We go down to the hospital. Now I want you to know that in between the time that I got the phone call and the time that I got to the hospital, this is what took place for me. And it wasn't because of any sort of directions I remembered. It was because this is the spiritual way of life that has been provided for me of listening to Sandy Beach and Chris Schroeder and CD and talks and messages and all of these years and practicing this 10th step on a day-to-day basis with stuff that really didn't matter. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Sitting at workshops and stuff like that and going, that sounds like a great idea. Hope I never need that, you know? And that's what's going on. But I walk into the hospital and I go directly to my wife and I hold her as she's sobbing. I told her it was going to be okay. It's because I knew it was. I went up to the doctors and the nurses and I thanked them from the bottom of my heart for looking after my little girl. And I walked in the room and she lived. She was on life support, but I put my hand underneath her head and I lifted her head up. I kissed her on the forehead and I told her I loved her and it was going to be okay. It's because I knew it was. And I walked out and sat with my wife as we waited for the news to come. My daughter survived, but I told you she's still on the street. She's more damaged than she ever had been, and this was a bad situation for her. But she's great. Like Sarah's great. She's your favorite. Like in AA, I got 4 daughters. She's the one you guys love the most because she's one of us. But she's crazier than shit. But she's a fantastic gal. And today she's 36 years old and beautiful, and she's opiate atrophy. So she walks like this, and she never will be straightened up. Right? She's very damaged from the lifestyle, the drugs, the hanging. She's very damaged. But my life got from, I'm on a beam, and it got from off the beam to on the beam, and off the beam to on the beam. I don't give a shit what your circumstances are. You should see me work with guys who are going through struggles. I don't lack compassion. I'll sit with you all day long. You know, I'll help you make arrangements. I will be with you in the painful times. But don't do this. Don't go back into self. When selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear crop up, what do? I ask God who wants to remove it. And I tell somebody about it. And I make amends if I've harmed anybody. I resolutely turn my attention to someone I can help. That's how it works. And that's what happened with Sarah. I'm getting warmed up. I got an older daughter, Dana. And all through COVID, you guys were there for me. You bought T-shirts, you know. Alfred tell about it, like 100 T-shirts, and distributed them across, and to raise funds for the break. My daughter calls me, and she'd banged her head around on an ATV while she was in the field, and rolled the ATV, and she said she wasn't feeling right, and she tell her to go to Tilsonburg and get checked out, and they send her, rush her to Hamilton, and she calls me while I'm at work, and I'm at my desk. Now, I'm trying to make this practical so people understand that this is the real stuff. I'm just doing my job, and being a clown and having fun and all that kind of stuff. Boom, phone rings. My daughter Dana says, I've got a brain tumor. I've got a brain tumor the size of a plum. And she is devastated. And she can't talk to her husband. He's a good guy in that, but he's got nothing for her. He has none of that. She needs her daddy. So she comes in. I lose my shit because this is happening to me. I get this call, and it's like, really? And I start losing it again. I think, oh my God, I go into a room adjacent to my office. I drop down to my knees. So you got to take this from me. Please take this from me. She's on her way here. I'm going to be of no use. Please take this from me. And I walk out and I tell my coworker the call I just got. By the time I got down to the stairs, I could be there for her. By the time I got down the stairs, she came around the corner. She fell into my arms sobbing, and I kissed her on the cheek, and I told her it was going to be okay because I knew it was. And she beat the brain cancer. She wasn't supposed to, but she did. And then she got lymph node cancer. And she beat that, second primary. These aren't metastasized, these are second primary cancer. And she beat that. And they drilled her, and they radiation and chemo, and my beautiful young daughter has been devastated by the treatment. Overwhelmed and beaten, and pieces of her jaw have fallen off, and she's been so sick. And JJ you saw her down, she's down in Nashville right now. She was at the Morgan Wallen concert last night. A year ago, December, there's three cancers. She got lung cancer. And they gave her 8 months to live, a year ago, December. And she was at the Morgan Wallen concert last night. And every single time we get this devastating news, when these crop up, what do? I ask God who wants to remove it. And every single time something like this happens, I get better at it. And more people get helped. What happens when the bad news comes? You know, I'm not going to turn this inward. You know, I have a wife who's also in this program, and she's just a model of absolute strength to me. I don't know how she does it. But I need this stuff. And it's real. This is not playtime. This is not like, I don't get to say everything except the sick child. Everything except the death of, everything except, it works for everything. Just like I was demonstrating in the 4th step. This is spiritual living. This isn't theoretical living. It says this is not a theory. This is not a theory, Marty. This is no way. You're not going to think your way through this shit. You're going to take these actions every time. And each time it happens, off the beam is less and less and less. And it puts me right here, right now, with you. I believe the reason I get so weird up here at the podium and get all freaked out and shit is because I can't help but get right here, right now, when I'm with you. I have a profound, deep belief in a God. Profound and deep connected belief in a God. But it's never available or as apparent to me as it is when I'm with you. And when I get up here, it's like it gets, oh my God, it's like it's the now. It's just the now. I'm here in Jersey. I don't give a shit about what happened yesterday or this morning. I don't care where it's going tonight. NHL playoffs, UFC, whatever it is we're doing, killing deer in the neighborhood where Chris lives, whatever we're doing tonight, whatever we decide to do, I'm good right here, right now, with you. And each moment that I've been moving through this day, this 10th step, this is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. This 10th step looks like this. And if you can't demonstrate it, and this is where I'm really getting freaked out these last couple years, if you don't live that way, if you can't get back to center on a fairly quick basis, I'm not going to tell you how long it should take. I'll tell you Sandy's story really quickly. Sandy was on the gurney going in for knee surgery, and he gets a phone call that his daughter had been murdered. And they said to her, he said, I'll be up there, and then, no, Dad, you get your knee surgery. You stay there, you get that knee surgery done. You've been waiting a long time. He laid back, put the phone on his chest, and said to himself, thought to his God, he says, well, two things are apparent. One is I'm going to have to forgive the perpetrator, and the second one is, why not now? And he didn't mean in that moment. He meant in that circumstance. And I challenge everybody here, what problems do you have? Shut up. What problems do you have, buddy? Really? Really? What problems do you have? Hey, any of us can come up to me at any point and say, you're wrong, Marty. I actually really do have problems. And I'll say, yeah, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. You have problems. Mm-hmm. That's the problem, not anything else. I got this guy that's saying to me, Dave, he was at your place. He's very grateful to Dave and Jen, and lost his business, went through a ton of difficulty, and I was having a conversation with him the night before last. I said, do you understand that your nefarious activities in life and business and your lack of a relationship with this power is the reason why you're suicidal? No, it's because my business is bad. It's because do you understand that it's your relationship with God that's the issue? And it's hard for people to conceive of that. Okay, no, I'll get to God later. I got to solve this problem. I'll get to God when the godly steps. I'll get to God in step 11. This is telling us that right here, right now, this way of life is freedom. This way of life is and it's available to everybody. It's the only way we can cease fighting everything or everyone. How do you not stand up for yourself or argue or dispute? Or how do you not do that? If you're living in the now, there's no room for that. My takeaway from step 10 is that I can actually be free, for real. It's not a passing phase. It's not a passing phase. I believe that, I said at the beginning, I think that the secrets to good living are here. As a man who's been sober for quite some time and has known tragedy and loss and trauma, and I've had counseling, but not the kind of counseling that actually is effective. Like I've lied to every counselor or therapist I've ever talked to. I've never been truthful to them. And all my life, I was a broken, damaged human being. And I get to this place here right now, and it's like, not anymore. I have been given the power and the strength to do what it is it's asked of me. When I'm asked to turn my attention to someone that I can help, to turn my thoughts resolutely to someone where I can be helpful, the moment I change my direction and my thoughts, I begin to heal. And in the now, I don't have any problems. Earl always says, get in between those two claps, right here, right now. Get in between that. And if you can stay there, without life's clamors, worldly clamors, and all that kind of stuff pulling you, if you can stay there, you will be living in the sunlight of the Spirit. This is what we're talking about in step 10. How can we I think it's undersold as a tool for living. I think it's almost like, okay, we have these 12 steps, we don't drink anymore, we don't have our solution anymore, so now we're going to sort of go through life experiencing the pain and the calamity of life with God. But it's not like that. It's not like that. It comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes. And if I don't have you, when Sandy was telling his story, he talked about being fairly young in sobriety and hearing the story of the drive-by shooting where the young black kid was killed, and then the mother said, they put the microphone in the guy's face, in the mother's face, and they said, how do you feel about the perpetrator? And she said, well, I've already forgiven him. And Sandy says, I remember sitting there, hearing that and thinking to myself, how could anybody have that level of spiritual living. I will never get there. And then a few years later, that Amish, the story of the Amish guy murdering the, and then the family sending all of their wares over. It became an international story, that one. And Sandy says, I heard that, and this is many years later, he said, I heard that, and I thought to myself, oh my God, how can people live like that? How can people live spiritually like that? I'll never be able to live like that. And then he got the news about his kid, and then his other daughter died as well in the following June. This happened in February, March, and then the following June, his other daughter died. And he was right here, right now. It doesn't mean you don't grieve. That's not what it means. It means that you go to this. You go immediately to this. And you find how you can be of use. And Judge Jack Quarterman told me that Sandy spoke 210 times that year, his daughter said, carrying a message of hope and power. When he could have been sitting at home justifiably mourning and being whining and complaining or crying and whatever it is you want to call it when someone's going through deep grief. I'm not diminishing it. I'm not putting it down or being disparaging about that. What I'm saying is if we do this and we turn our attention, we go through this stuff high level spirituality. God always has something in store for us that we may not even be aware of. It looks like bad shit's going to happen. If we get into right here, right now, use me as you will. Use me as you will. Again, all the secrets to good living are right there. Step 10. What are we going to do? We're going to roll right into 11? Yeah. You hit 11, okay? Good. Thanks, guys.
We'll take a break.
We're going to take a break. Okay.